Okay, you guys, we are going into Gallagher's Chapter 6, which is on purpose and audience, and I call it, Why Am I Doing This and To Whom Am I Doing It? And you'll notice we're reading Gallagher out of order, well, in part, because we did 4, 5, and now we're doing 6, but we've skipped some of the earlier ones. And we skipped the chapter where he sets up what he means by the Grecian Urn, and he refers to it here, so I'm just going to tell you briefly what it is. And I'm assuming you all know the illusion because you're English majors and perhaps many of you have taken Molly's class on Romanticism. If you don't know it, you should, and you should look it up. Anyway, for Gallagher, when he talks about the Grecian urn, what he's referring to is the idea of showing students models of what you want them to do without effectively parsing those models. So it's like you show them an essay and you say, look it, this is what you have to do, but you don't show them why that essay is good and how they can do the same things that that essay does to make their own writing good. You have to show them not just what the elements of successful writing look like, you have to show them how to master those elements. So when he talks about the Grecian urn, he's talking about essentially giving them something, saying do this, and not taking the time to connect what makes them successful with the skills that you're teaching. Now in this chapter, Gallagher talks about the purposes for writing. You can see that Amos is very unhappy that I'm not giving him attention. Anyway, Gallagher's talking about the purposes. And I want to reference James Britton, who also talked about the types of writing that we would do. And he and his colleagues classified writing into 3 types: transactional, expressive, and poetic. Now, poetic writing includes all genres of literary writing, the stuff we refer to as fiction, poetry, drama, the literary essays, songs, and letters, etc. Britain is a Brit, really. He's like from Great Britain. And his audience might not be confused with the term expressive, but I fear we sensitive American types might be, because for Americans, expressive often connotes emotional content. So I suggest you think of exploratory writing, expressive writing as exploratory writing, which is a tool for thinking and learning, while transactional writing is a tool for communicating with others. So think about the nuances of that. Not expressive, we're going to call it exploratory because we're Americans and we're hypersensitive. So exploratory writing is a tool for thinking and learning, exploring ideas. Transactional writing is a tool for communicating with others, which could be persuading them or arguing something. Now, as I've said, and will say again, our focus in methods is exploratory and transactional writing, not poetic. Although some of the elements of the poetic mode are applicable to these other modes, things like voice or metaphor. But I like to think of exploratory writing as the foundation of transactional writing and poetic as an element of transaction. But we're not going to focus on Britain. We're going to focus on what Gallagher has to say about purposes. On pages 123 and 124, Gallagher takes Britton's broad categories and converts them into purposes that are more accessible for students and I think more accessible for teachers. These are the reasons to write that you must teach, and you want to search for models that illustrate these purposes. Ideally, because as Gallagher suggests, these domains bleed into one another, you can find models that take on multiple purposes. Remember, everything you hear or read or see is a potential teachable text, and when you find texts that address these various purposes, you must show them how those texts address those purposes. Don't go all Grecian Urn on their asses. You might recall Gallagher's discussions of writing reasons from earlier in the semester and how we make writing relevant to students. Well, the new Colorado academic standards are our friend where this is concerned. Gallagher's chart that we just looked at lists real-world examples of the kind of writing he's talking about. Well, so do the standards, which include not just inquiry questions, or what we call essential questions on our lesson plans, and relevance and application. Ta-da! Look what it says. Relevance and application. Examples of how the grade level expectation is applied at home, on the job, or in a real-world relevant context. Those are the real-world examples. He lists some. They come right off the standards. And FYI, note the last topic, nature of the discipline. Can you say content essential questions and the understandings for your lesson plans? As I've said to you, this is an aside about lesson planning. Everything you need to know about creating lesson plans are on those standards, or in those standards, or on and in those standards, or in the standards on the sheets. The point is, use those. But here, the idea of relevance and application answers the questions for students, why do I have to do that? And suggests to you the kind of authentic activities you can create as you teach these skills. Let's pause for an invention strategy. As I've said, I think invention strategies are for more than the invention stage of writing. Yes, they are helpful for pre-writing, but you'll see that this exploratory strategy, the cube, can be used like the 5 W's in H, or free writing, or listing, or clustering, or topic blasting, for pre-writing, for organization, and for drafting. That's why you need to teach students what these various strategies are. You have to model them. You have to make students practice them, and you must require reflection, which you do by asking, which of the strategies do you like the best? How can you envision using these strategies in other content areas? That's what we mean by thinking about their learning. The cube is really cool. I actually had Peter make me a block that had those various names on it here, describe, compare, associate, yada, yada. And I thought, oh, how cool. And then I could throw it to students, say, give them a topic and say, okay, describe the topic. Except that I am a terrible thrower. I'm not particularly skillful, and I would hit students with the block, and it hurt. So now I thought about getting a piece of styrofoam, or taking a square box like a gift box and putting it in brown paper and writing those on it. But anyway, the point is, this is a great activity to do with students, to make them think more critically and more complexly and in a more complicated way, complicate, the Hillix words, about the topics that they're thinking about writing about, or once they have a topic, how to develop the data or the evidence or the discussion that will allow them to turn that topic into an outstanding writing. To me, purpose and audience are like chicken and egg. I never know which comes first. And in class, we're going to take a look at the rhetorical triangle. We'll do that the day we talk about this chat. Anyway, we're going to take a look at a rhetorical triangle, and we'll see, and it's like an equilateral triangle, not an isosceles or a scalene. I'm very impressed that I knew scalene. Anyway, so which comes first is going to be part of that discussion. Anyway, audience to me, though, is the neglected topic for discussion, because for so long, the teacher was the audience. That was it. I'm writing to the teacher. So we forget that we have to, one, propose other possible, more authentic audiences for student work, and two, to help students identify the intended audiences of the text they read and how those audiences affect what a writer writes. That is, the choices about content, voice, evidence, presentation, yada, 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 all go back to audience. And notice here I have these two, I have the black and the red, right? Because remember the Grecian Urn thing again. When you are talking about a text, you want to ask students to think about why that text was written and to whom that text was written. And then in their own writing, they need to answer the same kinds of questions. Why are you writing and to whom are you writing? And those two questions about purpose and audience will help them begin to frame their writing project. I grew up in New York City, so high school football was not that big a deal. Basketball was a little bit bigger. And games were played on Saturday afternoons. When I moved to Texas, I came to understand the cultural phenomenon that is high school football, and I fell in love with it. Now, I don't know if Kelly Gallagher is reffing the TV show Friday Night Lights when he talks about them in this chapter. And he offers his story for where his notion originated, which was sort of like Friday Night Lights. And I could wax poetic about the cultural text that is created in small Texas towns like Cotulla or Sanderson or Kermit, but that's for another rambling chat. For Gallagher, the role of audience and how we present our work is central, and of course I concur, and that's what he spends so much time in this chapter talking about, where he lists the kinds of activities he uses to create opportunities for authentic writing to real people presented in actual or as close to actual writing products. How can we create bright lights under which our students share their work? So you want to think about how you can incorporate his Friday night lights in your lessons for the classroom and in your lessons for out of the classroom presentation of student work. So as I said, we'll move on to talk about the rhetorical triangle, where a lot of these ideas about purpose and audience will be central. All right, we're done.